Thank you very much, Ashley. Good afternoon, everyone. How are you all this lovely day? I hope you're all having a great time and at least know which day of the week it is, because everyone seems very confused at the moment. But anyway, I would like us to make a quick start. So as Ashley said, this is a webinar about what Ofsted is looking for from the careers leader perspective. As he said, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat section. I do have it up but minimized, so I may not answer immediately, but I will certainly try and answer all questions at the end at least. So, question 1. Who the hell am I? Well, my name is Janet College. I am known as the Careers Defender. You can see me down at the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. My role is that of a trainer, and my background is that I'm a qualified teacher, and well over 20 years ago I was trained by the magnificent David Andrews to be what is today known as a careers leader, but back then was a careers coordinator, a work-related learning manager, head of careers, and all sorts of different names. But my entire background is based around careers education. I am not a careers advisor, and I have a great deal of respect for those who are careers advisors because I can't do your job. So, as far as I am concerned, the role of a school is to prepare young people for the world of work. And what we are going to look at today is how Ofsted will judge whether your school is doing a good job with that or not. So let's move on. Why am I interested in Ofsted? Well, it is a powerful driver. A lot of head teachers, their first question is always going to be what Ofsted wants to know, because their Ofsted grading is the one that is going to be on the banner outside of the school. And let's face it, none of us have ever seen a proudly displayed requires improvement banner. Every head teacher is worried about Ofsted. Having said that, much as I hate to admit it, we do value what we test. And one of the problems with careers over the years is it's very, very difficult to prove that careers education and careers guidance improves outcomes for young people. So we're now looking at what gets priority from SLT. And thankfully, careers has moved up the agenda of Ofsted, and that gives us a unique opportunity to be able to push careers to get more resources, more time, more involvement. So going back to Gert Biester, are we measuring what we value or valuing what we measure? And with Ofsted being involved now in careers, I'm going to have to say, at least they are starting to measure what we value. And maybe they will start valuing what we measure for them. So, Ofsted, major change in their emphasis from the very data-driven Ofsted that we are used to, where it's all about added value and exam results. The new inspection framework has now moved towards a much more holistic approach. They are looking at how the education experience actually impacts the young people in our charge. So they're looking much more at things like mental health, British values, career aspects, identity, and so on. So let's look at how that change has been implemented first of all. Well, the old judgment in areas were originally effectiveness of leadership and management, quality of teaching, learning and assessment, personal development, behaviour and welfare, and outcomes for pupils. And that was all amalgamated into one overall judgment. And they got one of four areas: outstanding, requires improvement, and so on. The only place where careers education was ever mentioned, and it was very, very rarely mentioned, was in the effectiveness of leadership and management. And they really didn't have, Ofsted really didn't have time to look at careers in very much depth. So, how are things moved on now? The new areas sound similar, but there are major differences, and these are the new areas. We still have the overall effectiveness, but now we have personal development. This is where you're going to find sex and relationships, British values, confidence, all those kind of things, as well as careers, education, information, advice and guidance. It's all going on in there. However, they will now be looking at how the careers department is being led and managed, which is a major step forward. And it can be a very difficult one in that many careers leaders are either on the SLT with about 15 different hats and trying to juggle them all, or in middle management. Either way, it means managing upwards, being able to be the school careers expert and to be able to steer the school with regards to what is being required. So that's how Ofsted will look at leadership and management. Behaviour and attitudes will look at motivation, confidence, and those kinds of areas for young people. So careers will again have an impact there. And quality of education, in as far as they will look at the quality of the careers education, advice and guidance that you have available to young people. Now, one thing we need to know about personal development, which is the major area where careers is involved, it will recognise, or Ofsted will recognise, that you cannot always assess the impact of the careers education programme and the advice and guidance whilst that child is still in school. In effect, you are planting a seed, and that seed may germinate today, but it may not germinate until someone's 35. So they are not going to be looking at the traditional assessment of input output. They are going to be looking at the quality and the intent of what you are trying to do. Okay, so they will look at how much effort and how much thought you put into putting together your programme. And here is a quote from Amanda Spielman, the head of Ofsted. Now, she was speaking at a governor's conference back in 2019. We are not attempting to judge the outcome. We are looking at what schools are putting into it and how they are approaching it. That was a direct quote about the personal development area. So the first thing to remember is that it is not about where they are now, where the young people are now. It's about where they potentially could be given your school's input into the careers programme. This is a good descriptor for personal development. And I've just picked out a few sections of this. This is the main area where careers is mentioned. And you will see there in that first little pink comment, there is a little triptych of words: future success in education, employment and training. And this is something that I have picked up from the framework. Those three words come together throughout the framework. So they are very heavily indicating that Ofsted is placing equal importance on the routes that young people could go through. So education into university, employment into jobs with training, and training, so apprenticeships and so on. It could be college education or whatever. So all three areas are given equal importance. The second little bit in pink is that all pupils receive unbiased information about potential next steps and high quality careers guidance. So this is putting the onus upon the school to make sure that young people are offered all possible routes. We all know the tired old anecdote about schools that are trying to feed their sixth form and don't let other sixth forms and apprenticeship providers in. We now have the Baker Clause, which tells us we have to ensure that all pupils have access to all of the routes. It also says not only does it have to be about all potential next steps, but the quality of careers guidance should be high quality. That is, that it should be a properly qualified careers advisor. The inadequate descriptor basically says you're not doing your job. The school doesn't ensure that pupils get access to unbiased information about next steps. So if you are not providing all young people with opportunities to discover about apprenticeships, school leaver programs, universities, colleges, other sixth forms, etc., you have the possibility of an inadequate judgment. Equally, if you are not making sure that all young people have access to careers guidance, again, possibility of an inadequate descriptor for personal development. The next area we need to look at is again another triptych: intent, implementation and impact. Now, I've very clearly put out what these are, and I am going to use an analogy to help try and move those sort of into your brain, because these three words come across again and again, not just in careers, but in all areas of Ofsted's framework. So, what is your intent? What is it you are trying to do with your careers education programme? I would term this to be your shopping list. If you were to sit down and write a shopping list of the perfect young person who would leave your school after having gone through your entire programme and made the most of it, would they be confident? Would they be able to identify the different routes that they have available to them, and so on? Your implementation is how you would expect to be able to deliver on your intent. So I'm working on a master chef or bake-off type analogy here. This is your recipe. How are you going to achieve your intent? How are you going to cook those different areas that are on your shopping list? And your impact is how you will measure your success. So what would Prue Leith and Paul Hollywood say at the end, or how would the restaurant critic judge it? Those three areas are areas you need to look at individually as you go through your planning, and they will be what Ofsted will be looking for. So, thinking about how those three things fit together, the things you need to think about when planning your careers programme is how you fit into the local community. It is really important that your school reflects what is going on around it, because the majority of young people will want to stay in the area close to their parents, at least initially. Some may want to go to university locally, some may want to go to college, and so on. So looking at how the wider area, the region that you're in, has jobs available and the types of employment available is really, really important. You need to look at the availability of training. Can young people get easily from the area in which they live to where they could be trained, or where they might go to, get an apprenticeship or go to college? And also the needs of society. There's been a lot of talk about the job losses post-COVID-19. We've heard of shops and other retail establishments going out of business. We've seen restaurants having to close down and saying they won't be able to reopen. So what effect will this have on the local area, and how will you respond to that? Flagging up types of employment that may be of interest to people who may be otherwise thinking of going into areas where there is high unemployment. So your intent needs to look really clearly at that, at making sure the young people have that resilience to deal with the employment market in the local area. So with your intent, one of the things I suggest you do is write an intent statement. Now this has a few uses. First of all, it makes it really clear in your mind what it is you're trying to do. And secondly, it makes it really easy to communicate with the rest of your community, everyone in your school, your stakeholders and so on, what it is you're trying to do. Now this one that I've put here is an intent statement from a special school. And it's very simple and it stands alone. This is what we are trying to do. And this one focuses really about independent living and choice and hope and optimism. And it finishes up with a statement to say, our aim is to identify how our pupils can access these intentions. So this is what we want to end up with. And this is, we want to identify how they're going to do that. And that is how our program is going to be constructed. So very, very simple. You will get a copy of the slides so that you can refer back to that if anyone's sitting there scribbling away or taking photos of the screen. Okay, very, very simple, standalone. The other the type of intent statement, it could be linked. Now this has been taken from another school. It's not a special ed school. Our school encourages students to aspire and value lifelong learning and to provide opportunity to develop key employability and enterprise skills, which are highly valued by employers, colleges, universities and apprenticeship providers. Very broad statement. That then links in to their implementation. They go on to explain what their program is. So they then explain what the careers program has been developed for and what they are trying to do, how they are going to do it. So they're then going to say things like careers is embedded across the curriculum. We have these at off timetable days. It may even go as far as to include the careers program for the year. Okay. Then it goes on to have the curriculum, so what topics are covered in which year groups, and then it links to the values of the school. So if you have a school motto or mission statement, that could be linked in there. So that's two ways of putting together your impact, what you want careers to be able to do. This should be readily available on the school website. And whichever form you decide to take, the whole of the community should know what the careers department is trying to do. So it's a major, major way of ensuring take up and not raised expectations throughout the entire school. Implementations. Now, from the overall effectiveness area of the framework, it said that it will look at how leaders have sequenced the curriculum and how they've identified the most useful areas. Okay. Now, I put a link down the bottom there to the careers framework, which is on the CDI website. And that is the one that most schools will use. It doesn't mean that you have to cover everything in the CDI framework. It is a really good idea to have audited your school and to see what careers work is being carried out in other areas. For example, health and safety is often delivered as part of science education or D&T, and team working and leadership will be covered in PE and so on. So making sure that your implementation takes advantage of what is going on throughout the entire school will show strength to the Ofsted inspectors. Making sure it's delivered in a timely manner. For example, things about decision making being delivered just before option choices and things like that. Now, when the Ofsted framework came out, it said, we know that you're moving your curriculum around because of this, so you're going to be given a year to complete your curriculum. However, post-COVID-19, we know that many schools haven't done that. So schools have effectively been given until the end of the next academic year, so the 2021 academic year, to have got your curriculum in order. Okay, so being able to talk to the Ofsted inspector about where you are in developing your curriculum and how you're identifying the needs of your cohort is going to be really important. So very quickly looking at impact. We've had intent, we've had implementation, we're now looking at impact. And remember what I said back at the beginning, you're planting a seed. They're not actually going to be looking to measure how well you're doing. They are going to be measuring the quality of your input. So they are going to look at your curriculum intent. That is why you need an intent statement. And they are going to talk to your SLT and your subject leaders about how careers is going to be delivered. They will look at any documents that you use in your planning. The one thing Ofsted is trying to do is to decrease paperwork. So they don't want you keeping paperwork just to wave in front of them. They haven't got the time to read it, and it needs to be important to you. So they will only look at the documents you normally use. So that may be something like your compass reports and things like that. They will also expect teachers to have expert knowledge of the subjects they teach. Key point on this is if you are delivering careers through PSHE time and teachers are delivering that, you need to be talking about whoever leads CPD in your school to ensure that all teachers have had some input on careers so they understand what it's for, why they're doing it and why it's important. And you need to make sure that you identify gaps in the teacher's knowledge and put training in to deal with that. So my recommendation would be that you put together a staff training needs audit to ask people how confident they feel. And the majority of teachers will often say, well, not very confident. So it is up to you then to work out what they need to be able to feel more confident in delivering careers material. So I said that the Ofsted inspectors will be talking to SLT, and they'll be talking to other people as well. So who do you need to make sure knows what your intent is and how you are implementing it? Well, first things first is your senior leadership team. That can be an uphill struggle. That's the managing upwards area that I was talking about at the beginning of this presentation. Being your school's careers expert, ensuring that the SLT know what the latest thinking is and the expectations. They can't keep on top of everything. They need each department head to be that school's expert on their department. So you need to be your careers expert. Middle leaders will need to know what's expected. Thinking here more of gaps before and delivering careers learning in subject areas, linking the subject areas to the world of work. Governors, it is recommended that you have a link governor and that you report to the governors at least once a year with what you're doing, so that they know what is going on, and also that governors are involved, certainly with things like employer encounters and visits and so on. You also need the teachers involved. They're the ones who will ultimately be delivering at least some aspects of careers, and they need to know where it fits in amongst all the other 1,000,005 hats that they have as a teacher. And finally, the young person in the classroom. We all know that the average year 9, if accosted by an Ofsted inspector in the dining room queue and said, "What careers work have you been doing recently?" We'll sort of go, "Don't know." So it is really, really important that it is very clearly flagged up to all of these people what careers is trying to do, why you're trying to do it, and how you're trying to do it, so that they can talk about it. Because we all know that those nice shiny faced compliant pupils that are pulled out to speak to all visitors are not the ones that Ofsted really want to talk to. They will stop people in the corridor. They will talk to people in classrooms. And those are the people you need to make sure are on board with what you're trying to do. So just to clarify what Ofsted are looking for. They call it triangulation. So they will look at the data and evidence. So they will look at your careers section of the school website. They will look at your planning documents. They will look at your careers calendar and so on. They will observe, they will walk around the school. Are they seeing careers using science displays? Are they seeing careers using RE? Those kind of things are really important signals. Are they seeing your careers intent statement in school planners, on the walls in form rooms and so on? But the real thing you need to think about is how staff and pupils will respond. And how will that little kid, year 9, in the dinner queue respond? If you focus a fair bit of effort onto that, you will find that a big percentage of your job is going to be positive, and you will have much more engagement with careers. Okay, let's think about what people know, just to summarise. Are your SLT on board with what you're trying to do? There will always be some that won't. There'll be focused on exam results, getting them to university or whatever. But getting the majority of SLT and MLT on board is really, really important. Making sure subject leaders have display boards, have careers activities, or you may be thinking about career champions. So that may be teachers who act as a conduit between your careers team, i.e. yourself, your careers advisor, whoever is involved with the careers department, and the subject department. So that teacher will be the person who gets the rest of that department involved. Or it could be pupil career champions, where they are in charge of ensuring that their tutor group receives careers information, sees posters, sees opportunities, and so on. What are the teachers responding to within the careers program? The tutors, do they have a enthusiasm for what they're doing? I remember going back to my days in teaching, I had one particular teacher who, when I was doing learning walks, I discovered playing a Simpsons episode instead of delivering careers content. So dealing with these problems, knowing that they're there, is the key to them. So doing your learning walks, talking to people, and ensuring that there is an enthusiasm there. But do remember to use your time wisely. There will always be some who can't be reached. Have your quick wins and then work on the middle ground, first of all, to get the majority involved. And don't worry too much if there's one or two that aren't. Can pupils identify careers learning? Well, a quick way of doing that is to have a careers logo. So that anytime something is delivered in a subject lesson that is careers focused, the logo can be on the flip chart or the board or whatever, or the PowerPoint. Children will pick up on this. And if it's used consistently across the entire teaching team, it will soon become second nature to children realising that if that is there, it's careers focused. Quite a number of schools that I've talked to have adopted this, and they have a competition to design a logo with year sevens, get them all excited and so on. So Ofsted will pick up if there is a major problem. Don't worry about the one or two, but think about things holistically. Are the majority of staff and the majority of young people involved and enthused by what you're doing? But does everybody know the aims of the careers department? Just to flag up again, CPD is really important as part of that, getting everyone enthused and making sure that teachers feel comfortable with what they're delivering. Okay, now this is from a direct quote from the framework. So one of the key things they will look at is a CPD diary. It's important to remember that CPD isn't necessarily sitting at a webinar or an afternoon out with a nice hotel and a nice lunch. CPD comes in all different shapes and forms. It could be you sitting in with a year team and going through the PSHE lessons with them. It could be a staff member sitting in the back whilst an employer is talking to young people. It could be an opportunity, as one school I've been working with did recently. They had an inset day, and every teacher went out and shadowed someone in industry. So CPD isn't all about training courses. It's about reading, it's about experiencing, and for you, it is about recording that and knowing what's happening. I would also, I've got no idea what happened there, sorry. You should also show evidence of your careers leader training, whether it's Teach First or an assessed programme, or whether you've just done the 12-hour online one from the CEC. Make sure that you show your careers leader training and your careers advisor training. As I said, make a list of what CPD you have provided for staff, and also show the Ofsted inspectors the audit if you have taken one. Sorry, someone has got their microphone on. Could they please turn it off? I'm getting quite a lot of noise coming back. Thank you. Okay, the role of personal guidance here. It does say very clearly that all young people should have access to good quality professional careers guidance. Okay, it is contentious because we know that schools have very little money, and a lot of schools are trying to get careers advisors very, very cheaply. Many schools are going for level 3 or level 4 careers advisors because they are cheaper than level 6. The Ofsted inspector will not check whether your advisor is level 4 or level 6 or has got no level at all. No, I tell a lie, sorry. They will check if there's no level at all. They will ask what training they are currently doing. Okay, so you will not fail if you have got a level 4 careers advisor. But keep in mind that statutory guidance does say that careers advisors working in schools should be level 6 and they should be on the register of career development professionals. Okay, but you will not be failed if that is not happening. And the reason you would not be failed is because the statutory guidance said should, not must. However, if you do want to achieve a Quality in Careers award, you must have a level 6 RCDP advisor. Okay. So, what is happening in schools? We know that some schools have already been inspected. Even though inspections are currently on hold, they're expected to be back for September. What is happening? Whereas previously, very few schools had any comment about careers at all, 16% of schools had no comment now. So that actually means that 86% of schools are finding comments about careers in their Ofsted inspection reports. You do need to remember that the inspection reports are now much more parent friendly. They are very short and to the point. Okay, so whereas careers wasn't mentioned before in 4 or 5 page reports, now in a 2 or a 3 page report, most schools are getting a comment. 1% had more than one comment about careers, and that was usually when it was really bad or really good. Those schools that didn't get a comment tended to be a Section 8 inspection. That's a short inspection where a school has previously been good and is expected to continue to be good. So they only get a 1-day inspection instead of a 2. 8% of schools that were inspected didn't have a careers section or careers policies online, and you should be having those in every school. And 46% of schools didn't have an access policy. That is the Baker clause, showing who to get in contact with if you are an employer or a training company that wants to come in and speak to your young people. it is law that you have that on your website somewhere. And in the later inspections, there have been a number of schools that have been publicly cited for not having had that. And very few schools, less than 1%, had comments about improving careers. Comments about careers tend to come in what the school does well or better. And a few of those comments were in areas that schools needed to improve. One thing I will draw to your attention is that at the end of the inspection team will sit down with the head teacher and go through their recommendations in much more detail than what is in the report. And it is recommended that during that meeting, there is someone taking notes. And you may well find that even if careers isn't mentioned in the report that is passed out to parents and available online, that there will have been comments about what can be improved or what went well in careers. So it's worth talking to your head teacher or SLT link once your inspection has happened. So very quickly before we go to questions, I decided to email every careers leader that had been inspected. Okay, and these are the results of the replies that I'd had. 3/4 of, or more than 3/4 of careers leader had a meeting with an inspector. Some of those meetings were more than an hour, but the majority were between 30 and 60 minutes. Okay, and some of those were a shared meeting with another department head, like the head of PSHE or citizenship or something. I asked careers leaders, did you know if your staff had been asked about the Gatsby benchmarks? And what worried me is a third didn't know. The careers leaders hadn't gone and asked, were you asked about careers? Okay, but 12.5%, an eighth, did know that teachers were asked about Gatsby benchmarks. So it's really clear that the Ofsted inspectors are starting to wise up about what the Gatsby benchmarks are, and they are asking teachers about them. Subject leaders, a third basically said they've been asked about careers in their subject area. The question here is, can you hope that you get an Ofsted inspector that doesn't ask, or do you actually prepare in case they do ask? So that is a question only your own conscience can go with. Almost 60% were asked about their programme. Okay, Gatsby benchmark 1. And nearly half said it was obvious that the inspector had looked at their programme online. Okay, and they were asked about their programme and what was included and why it was included. Almost 70% were asked about encounters with employers and employees, and 52% were asked about encounters with FE and HE. About a third were asked about how encounters were tracked, and about a quarter were not asked about encounters at all. So it is obvious that Ofsted are there looking for the evidence of young people being given opportunities. But there were some interesting points that came out from this. Some questions that were asked: how do you manage encounters with other sixth forms? Obviously picking up on how some schools want to maintain their own sixth forms. Another question was, how do you address disengaged pupils? And then yet another is, how is safeguarding managed? And quite a number were asked about the opportunity to go out on work experience too. 30% of people who responded said they were asked about access to a careers advisor and what level that careers advisor was qualified to. And if you can see the figures in the brackets, that is getting to be a more common question, the more inspections that are happening. Okay, and less people were being asked, do you have a qualified careers advisor and what level are they? Almost 40% were asked about monitoring and quality insurance, and 17% detail about that. There were also quite a lot of questions from Ofsted about differentiation, especially around SEND pupils and pupil premium. Okay, but still almost a third were not asked about how you differentiate that, which is a bit strange when you think of Gatsby 3 being about how we personalise the delivery, which would indicate to me that inspectors are still feeling their way with looking at this somewhat. Now, comments came in thick and fast from careers leaders. Quite a few were less than complimentary, shall we say. This first one, where the careers leader was in with the PSHE lead, asked about NEETs, but when the person tried to speak about careers, the inspector wasn't particularly interested, and the careers leader did feel rather disheartened by the demeanour of the Ofsted inspector. I would remind everyone that if you are not asked to speak to an Ofsted inspector, you can ask to speak to an inspector. And I think this is a really key way of ensuring that inspectors realise just how important careers is within a school. And especially in this post-COVID situation, where we know that employment for young people is going to be so much more difficult in the near future. We need to get that message across to them. This is another school where there were concerns in other areas, and they didn't want anything on paper. They also said the Ofsted inspector didn't seem awfully well informed. All inspectors have had half a morning with David Andrews, but that was a little while ago. So there may be some newer Ofsted inspectors that haven't had the training, but most have had at least a tiny little bit. But do remember that the majority of Ofsted inspectors are not careers people. They don't have a careers background. So they may be struggling. So let's get out there and educate them so that they realise how important it is. Moving on to a much more positive comment. This one I will read. Apologise for reading off the slide. I found the process very positive and an opportunity to share the good work that I had done. They also spoke about work experience and in particular how the sixth form should relate to a career the student is considering. In the end, I met with all inspectors and they found they were very responsive to all my evidence. I had a lot of pupil voice evidence that clearly showed inspectors what students felt about the support that they had received, and this was also referred to in the inspection report. That is the kind of experience I would love all of you to have the next time the dreaded phone call comes through. And we as a community of careers professionals can ensure that just as teachers who are sitting in the back of an employer encounter can have that little bit of CPD, we can ensure that the inspectors have that little bit of CPD. And who knows, the next school they may go to, they may ask more about careers and they may discover something more. So it's about spreading the word about how important careers is. Now you probably realise why I have the name Careers Defender. Now, this comes from Sean Harford, who is one of the senior people at Ofsted. And this was something he said to an all-party parliamentary group recently. He said that careers has improved and that Ofsted had tried to show this through strengthening the inspection handbook. They've looked at how involved employers and providers are, and they are looking at the Baker Clause. Okay. Third point, you will not be entirely responsible if the school gets inadequate for personal development, because that whole section is not just careers, it is other things as well. Okay, but do remember, if you have a very strong careers department, you may counterbalance something that isn't as strong and stop them slipping into requires improvement. But he did come through and reiterate, we want to be sure that quality career routes are in place. So that has come directly from Ofsted this year. So this is me at the end. This is my assessment of how well Ofsted is doing with careers. They are sort of getting there. They're taking their time, and it is baby steps, but they are doing their best and they are moving forward. So you will be relieved to know that is the end of me waffling on. I do have some time for questions if there are any there. Ashley, would you like to have a look? Everyone else, if you want to get typing with any questions at the end.
Hello, everybody. If you have any questions, just pop them in the chat box and we'll do our best to answer them. As Janet said, the webinar has been recorded and will be sent out to everybody who signed up.
Lovely.
But does anybody have any questions?
I've reduced everyone to absolute silence. What I would like to say is, if you have a look down the bottom of the screen, even if your mind has gone completely blank now and you're sitting there with a glazed expression on your face, trying to take all that whistle-stop information in, have a look at the website. You can contact me directly through the website, and I'm quite happy to deal with any questions or receive feedback, you know, how you felt through this webinar and so on.
And we have had a question come through. Are colleges inspected the same way?
Colleges are inspected in the same way. There's a slightly different framework, and in all honesty, they look in much more details in colleges than they do in schools. Even within schools, there is a different judgment for the school sixth form from the main school, and there is much more about careers in there than there is in the schools framework. Now, I'm quite happy to answer more questions on that in a bit more detail, but if you have a look at the sixth form and colleges framework, you will see that it is much more central. It's not just an area from one of the sub areas. It's actually included in the overall judgment as well.
Okay.
Is that it?
That is the only question we've got.
Okay.
Anybody have anything?
No
If anything comes to you afterwards, just drop me an email and we'll try and get it passed along and answered for you.
Yeah.
But if nobody's got any questions, Is that
Well,
okay? Should I end it here?
yeah, thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed it, or at least found it useful. And thank you, Catherine, for saying thank you. Much appreciated. It's always a bit daunting sitting here talking to your computer for a while. It's good to hear you found it useful.
Thank you all
Thank you very
for
much.
attending, and we hope to see you again soon.
Thank you. Bye bye, everyone.